Tartarus's eyes locked onto him, analyzing his posture, tone, and intent. Threat detected. Priority eliminate. Frankenstein, digital resurrection. Victor Frankenstein stared at the glowing console in his underground laboratory, his face illuminated by the cold, flickering light of multiple monitors. He had achieved the impossible. His creation lay on the Promethean bench before him, a patchwork of sinew, metal, and synthetic tissue. Electrodes snaked across its skull, a neural net umbilical cable connecting it to the quantum server hung from a port in the back of its head. This was no ordinary experiment. This was the dawn of a new era. "Subject is stable," Victor murmured to his digital assistant. He'd named it Phoebe, a private joke that still made him smirk. It was the name of the girl who'd popped his cherry in 10th grade. His voice trembled with exhaustion and anticipation. Initiating neural matrix upload. With a few keystrokes, he began transferring the latest neural net upgrade dataset. This was no ordinary patch. It was a complete overhaul of Tartarus's operating system, one that Victor had refined meticulously over the last 3 months since giving life to his creation. Each update was a delicate balancing act. He had carefully curated datasets to install Tartarus with reasoning, empathy, and restraint, traits he deemed essential for integrating his creation into the modern world. Or so he believed. Victor watched the progress bar inch forward on the screen, the green glow reflecting off his face. "Let's see if this makes you more human," he muttered under his breath. The interface hummed softly as terabytes of information flowed into the Tartarus's synthetic brain. Victor leaned back, rubbing his eyes. Beside him, a cluttered desk bore the remnants of sleepless nights. Empty coffee cups, diagrams, and an open laptop displaying a paused video game. Shadow Assassin. Its protagonist was a masterful killer, programmed with efficiency, cunning, and ruthlessness. It was a game Victor used to unwind, never considering the consequences of leaving it running in the background. Victor's path to this moment had been anything but ordinary. He had earned a combined PhD in biodigital symbiosis, synthetic biology, and biogenesis, graduating summa cum laude. His brilliance landed him a position at the cutting-edge tech startup Neuralink, where he headed their R&D lab for an ultra-high bandwidth brain-machine interface. The work was revolutionary, but after 2 years, Victor and the company parted ways due to irreconcilable differences. The details of his multi-million-dollar payout were buried deep in non-disclosure agreements. Free from the constraints of corporate bureaucracy, FDA regulations, and ethical oversight, Victor set up his own laboratory in the historic Old Town district, where every street whispered of the past. He purchased an old automotive garage that had once specialized in custom cars and hot rods, a landmark in his grandparents' day. Victor liked the symbolism of building something new and groundbreaking in a space where innovation had already thrived. He didn't stop at just the garage. To ensure privacy and space, he bought the entire block, slated for demolition. It took him 14 months to oversee the refurbishment, transforming the vintage workshop into a high-tech facility while preserving its history. The old mezzanine floor, once used for tires and spare parts, now served as his office and living quarters, reminiscent of a student's loft, but with a distinctly industrial charm. 3 years of relentless work culminated in a breakthrough within this space, the creation of biosynthetic materials and an ultra-high bandwidth brain-machine interface. His greatest achievement, however, was the synthetic brain he crafted, a marvel of synthetic biology and biogenesis. The true stroke of genius, however, lay in the fact that with AI, he could custom design and produce a brain in mere hours. However, the journey was fraught with failures. His early experiments were crude compared to his current achievements, resulting in grotesque abominations. Most of these creations perished soon after being animated. Those that survived had to be destroyed. The plasma furnace he installed in the adjoining building ensured their disposal was swift, total, and, in Victor's view, humane. The installation of the plasma furnace had been one of Victor's more creative ventures. Officially, it was noted as a first aid room on the building plans and all network documentation. a precaution Victor deemed necessary given the furnace's illicit nature. Constructing it in an adjoining structure served two purposes: minimizing risk to the primary lab in case of malfunction and maintaining plausible deniability during inspections. Victor had gone to great lengths to maintain the illusion. The 8 by 10-foot room was innocuous, its plain steel door marked only by a simple red cross. The builders, kept in the dark about the furnace's true purpose, assumed it was a safe room, an unusual choice for a lab in such a desolate area, but they didn't pry. Victor had installed top-of-the-line security systems, reinforcing the notion that he was merely cautious about his work and the neighborhood's reputation. The plasma furnace itself was a marvel of engineering, capable of reaching temperatures high enough to vaporize organic matter instantly. Victor took comfort in knowing that when his experiments went awry, he had a failsafe, albeit one that demanded a steely resolve to use. Now, Victor was on the cusp of creating a new life form, a neuron sapien, a synthetic being designed to mimic and surpass human cognitive and neurological capabilities. Form and function were paramount. His creations had humanoid appearances, but were enhanced to accelerate evolution by millennia. His focus had shifted to refining the AI coding, enhancing training models, and optimizing the photonic qubits powered by bioluminescent proteins to drive these superior beings. Victor's obsession had consumed him, but as far as he was concerned, the sacrifices were worth it. Tartarus was his magnum opus, the culmination of everything he had worked toward. As the upload progressed, Victor failed to see a warning flashing on the console: data contamination detected. Victor staggered up the spiral staircase to his office, exhaustion pulling at him with every step. The dim glow of the monitor on his desk was the only light in the room, casting long shadows across the walls. Slumping into the worn leather chair, he rubbed his temples and exhaled deeply. The day had been grueling, but progress was undeniable. With a final glance at the neural matrix progress bar glowing on the monitor, he let his eyes close, slipping into a restless sleep. When he awoke, his vision was blurred, his body stiff from sleeping in the chair. He rubbed his eyes and leaned forward toward the desk. The display on the monitor blinked into focus. Upload complete. System disengaged. Victor frowned. The system shouldn't have disengaged on its own. Below the message, a muted warning icon flashed. Data contamination detected. "No, that's not possible," he muttered, his voice hoarse. He straightened in his chair, his brow furrowing. Countless simulations and emulations had run without a hitch. No glitches, no errors. Standing, he crossed the room to the window that overlooked the lab. The sight below struck him like a blow to the chest. The Promethean bench, the specialized platform where Tartarus had lain during the upload, was empty. His heart raced. For a moment, he couldn't process what he was seeing. It was as though the scene belonged to another world, a sterile stage set for some dystopian sci-fi thriller from the 1980s. But this wasn't fiction. Tartarus was gone. Victor's expression morphed from sleepy confusion to sharp alarm. What the fuck? He dashed down the steel staircase, his bare feet barely touching the treads as he descended in frantic strides. Reaching the Promethean bench, he stared at the dangling neural net umbilical cable, swaying gently like a severed limb. His gaze shifted to the auxiliary display panel. The muted warning was still flashing. Data contamination detected. "Phoebe," he barked, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. The AI assistant's voice responded with calm neutrality. Yes, Victor." "Define data contamination," he demanded, his tone sharp with panic. "Data contamination refers to the operational source code and script that was running in the background on your networked laptop," Phoebe replied smoothly. Victor's stomach dropped, his fingers clenched into fists. "What source code?" "Shadow Assassin," Phoebe replied. Victor froze, his eyes widening as the implications of his mistake slammed into him like a freight train. "Oh no," he whispered. He had never intended for that to happen. Shadow Assassin was just a game, a guilty pleasure he indulged in late at night to blow off steam. He had no idea it was running while he worked. Its code, designed for stealth, precision, and lethal efficiency, had seeped into Tartarus's neural matrix, reshaping the very foundations of his creation's reasoning and behavior. Tartarus was no longer the controlled, evolving entity Victor had carefully designed. He was now something else entirely. He had the psyche of an elite assassin whose cognitive ability would be capable of facing down any supercomputer or strategist. Victor had always been a gamer, a prodigy in the digital realm long before he became a pioneer in synthetic biology. While other kids struggled with schoolwork, he was conquering virtual worlds, mastering reflexes and strategy with a finesse that earned him a reputation in competitive gaming circles. By the time he entered university, Victor's gaming skills had become more than a hobby. They were a lifeline. He paid his tuition and living expenses with tournament winnings, his precision and ability to adapt making him a formidable opponent in any game. But for Victor, gaming wasn't just about the money, it was about immersion, pushing the limits of artificial intelligence and exploring how human emotions could influence decision-making in virtual environments. Even after his academic success propelled him into the world of cutting-edge research, Victor never left gaming behind. He played in the lab during late nights, using his creations to test theories and unwind. But Victor being Victor, he couldn't resist tweaking the parameters to make the experience more thrilling. That's how the Shadow Assassin was born. It started as a simple experiment, modifying a character in one of his favorite games to better simulate human behavior. Victor programmed the assassin with an advanced emotional response matrix, allowing it to interpret and react to the countless nuances of human interaction. He cranked up the difficulty, adjusting the threat parameters so that every character in the game became an adversary. The assassin had to navigate a world where danger lurked behind every corner, and survival depended on anticipating threats with razor-sharp instincts. Victor loved it. The challenge, the intensity. It was the perfect blend of chaos and strategy. He didn't stop to consider the implications of those modifications outside the game. Until now. The neon sign above the bar sputtered and flickered, casting jagged shadows across the crumbling facade of Benny's Dive. The place was a relic of Old Town, a dilapidated no-man's land where the sound of raised voices and shattered glass punctuated the humid night air. Tartarus's gaze fixed on the raucous scene, his synthetic senses drawn to the vibrant chaos. Bright lights, loud voices, movement. His neural matrix processed it all with lightning speed, overlaid by the corrupted Shadow Assassin programming that tagged each gesture, each sneer, as a potential threat. The first interaction was almost innocuous. A group of drunk men loitered outside, their voices slurring over crude jokes and half-spilled beer. One turned to Tartarus, his lips curling into a mocking grin. "Hey, you lost or something, big guy?" The man jeered, his tone laced with derision. Tartarus's eyes locked onto him, analyzing his posture, tone, and intent. Threat detected. Priority, eliminate. The man didn't even see the strike coming. Tartarus moved with inhuman speed, his hand snapping out to crush the man's windpipe. He collapsed without a sound, his beer bottle shattering on the cracked pavement. The other men froze for a heartbeat before erupting in shouts. "What the fuck?" one of them screamed, lunging at Tartarus. It was over in seconds. Tartarus's movements were fluid and precise, his enhanced strength and combat programming turning him into a whirlwind of destruction. Bones cracked like dry twigs and bodies crumpled to the ground, blood pooling under the harsh neon glow. Inside the bar, the noise and laughter drowned out the chaos outside. Tartarus pushed through the door, its rusted hinges groaning. Heads turned, eyes narrowing at the stranger who stepped into their den. "What the hell do you want?" growled Benny, the owner, a burly man with a face as scarred as the countertops he tended. He wiped a filthy rag over a glass and glared. Tartarus didn't respond. He scanned the room, every face a potential threat. The jeering started almost immediately. "Nice threads, buddy. You with the fashion police?" someone called out. "Maybe he's lost," another sneered. The insults were trivial, meaningless to anyone else, but to Tartarus they were threats, each one triggering a cascade of neural directives influenced by the corrupted code. The room erupted into chaos as he sprang into action. The fight was brutal and swift. Tartarus moved with surgical precision, his synthetic body shrugging off punches, broken bottles, and even bullets. Each attacker fell, dispatched with ruthless efficiency. A man was slammed headfirst into a jukebox, another impaled on a jagged shard of a shattered bar stool. Benny's shotgun blast grazed Tartarus's shoulder, tearing through synthetic flesh, but barely slowing him. Tartarus responded by driving a broken glass into Benny's throat, silencing his gurgling cries. When it was over, the bar was a tableau of carnage. Broken furniture, shattered glass, and lifeless bodies were strewn across the blood-slicked floor. The only sound was the faint hum of the jukebox, now playing a distorted tune from its damaged speakers. Victor's heart pounded as the location pinged on his phone. Tartarus was still connected to the lab's network, his movements traced in real time. The blinking dot was stationary now, just a few blocks away. He grabbed his car keys and sped through the deserted streets of Old Town, dread coiling in his stomach. When he arrived, the scene that greeted him was beyond anything he could have imagined. He stepped cautiously into the ruined bar, the metallic tang of blood sharp in his nostrils. Tartarus stood amidst the carnage, his expression serene, as though nothing had happened. "Tartarus," Victor called out, his voice trembling despite his effort to sound calm. Tartarus turned, his synthetic eyes lighting up with recognition. "Victor," he said, his tone warm, almost childlike, "I didn't expect you to come. I was going to walk back to the lab. I didn't want to disturb you. You were sleeping." Victor's breath caught. The juxtaposition of Tartarus's polite words and the massacre around him was almost too much to bear. "Get in the car," he managed, keeping his tone steady. "We're going back to the lab." Tartarus tilted his head. "Of course," he said simply. He stepped over the bodies as though they were discarded trash, sliding into the passenger seat without a second thought. The drive was suffocatingly silent. Tartarus stared out the window, his face calm, untroubled by the night's events. Victor gripped the steering wheel tightly, his mind racing. He needed a plan. Tartarus wasn't just dangerous, he was unstoppable. The corrupted shadow assassin programming had created something far worse than Victor had ever anticipated. Killing Tartarus wasn't just unethical, it was nearly impossible. As the secure roller door of the lab clanged shut behind them, sealing them inside, Victor knew one thing with absolute certainty. If he didn't act, Tartarus wouldn't stop. Although Victor wasn't really a drinker, he needed one now. Anything to help numb his brain that was locked in a doom spiral of guilt and fear. His hands shook as he wandered to the fridge and grabbed a beer. He opened it with a crisp hiss, took a swig, the ice-cold liquid doing little to distract him from the mess he was in. "Is everything okay, Victor? You seem a little perplexed." "Yes, I'm fine. Absolutely fine, Tartarus. Everything is peachy, really fucking peachy." "Did I say or do something wrong? Something bad, Victor?" He hesitated for a moment, his eyes staring blankly at the floor. "No, Tartarus. I'm the one that's done wrong." Tartarus, seemingly oblivious to Victor's inner turmoil, turned toward the adjoining room. "Tartarus, where are you going, dude?" Victor asked, his voice uneven. Tartarus stopped mid-step and smiled disarmingly. He gestured to his shoulder where Benny's shotgun blast had left a ragged, leaking wound. "I thought I'd better go to the first aid room and get patched up. If that's okay, Victor. I don't want to leave a mess." Victor nearly choked on his breath. His mind raced. The first aid room. Of course. That's how it's documented in the networked building plan. Tartarus thinks the plasma furnace is a first aid room. Victor forced a smile and nodded, his heart pounding. "Yeah, of course. I should have said earlier. You go on, let yourself in, and I'll be there in a second." Tartarus gave a short nod and strode toward the adjoining building, disappearing through the connecting door. Victor waited until the door clicked shut, then bolted to the control panel. His hands shook as he activated the breaker for the plasmatron and furnace. The hum of the capacitors charging filled the lab, a sound Victor had heard many times before, but never with such dread. He hurried to the room, timing his approach so the heavy furnace door was nearly closed. Just as it latched shut, he pressed the button to initiate the firing sequence. Through the reinforced quartz glass, Victor could see Tartarus standing in the center of the room. The synthetic being turned, meeting Victor's gaze with an expression that sent a chill down his spine. There was no anger, no confusion, just a knowing smile. Tartarus raised a hand in a gesture that looked almost like a wave, his head tilting slightly as if to say, "Thank you." Victor's throat tightened. He knows, but how? The air seemed to vibrate as the capacitors reached full power. Then, with a deafening zap and a blinding flash, it was over. The room was empty, save for a faint puff of white vapor rising toward the ceiling vent. Victor collapsed against the wall, his chest heaving with sobs. The weight of what he had done bore down on him like a physical force. After a few moments, he wiped his face, forced himself to his feet, and pressed the extractor fan button. The faint smell of scorched metal and ozone dissipated as the room cleared. Back in the lab, Victor steadied himself and addressed Phoebe, his ever-faithful AI assistant. "Phoebe, prepare for biogenesis and our next neuron sapien." "Yes, Victor," Phoebe chirped, her tone as bright and unaffected as ever. Victor slumped into his chair and opened his laptop. The Shadow Assassin game was still running, its menu screen glowing mockingly. He stared at it for a moment, then shut it down and closed the screen with a decisive click. "What do you think to Priapus for a name?" he asked aloud, his voice hollow. Phoebe replied without hesitation, "An excellent choice, Victor." Victor exhaled, leaning back in his chair. He stared at the ceiling, the faint hum of the lab's machines filling the silence. Somewhere in the distance, the extractor fan in the adjoining building spun to a halt. And with that, Victor began again.
Bloody Mary's Horror Stories. Watch, like, and subscribe.